there's a real soft place in the earth right under it.
On June 16th, 1987, Ron Wyatt and a film crew from the United States of America traveled to eastern Turkey at the express invitation of the governor of the Turkish province of Ari. The purpose of this expedition was to participate in and film a ceremony which memorialized and commemorated a site located on Cessna Dog Mountain, known locally as Doomsday Mountain, as the landing site of Noah's Ark. The ceremony was the culmination of 10 years of meticulous, painstaking, often dangerous research by Ron and his associates. On the historic occasion of June 20th, 1987, the governor of Ari has announced to the world that Turkish archaeological authorities agree with Ron's findings that the area under investigation is indeed the landing site of the legendary Ark. The governor, key military officials, local officials, and police have gathered in preparation for the ceremony. Due to Ron's contributions and efforts, he is made a guest of honor and is asked to actively participate in the dedication of the site. A visitor center is soon to be built, and construction plans are well underway. As the governor completes the dedication speech, the ceremony is completed with the holy sacrifice of a lamb. As each participant shovels commemorative concrete into the first footing, a prayer is said for the lamb's blood to cleanse the earth and keep the area free from evil. The governor has made the area an international park, and all faiths of the world are made welcome to visit and gaze upon what they believe to be the mortal remains of Noah's Ark. This saga began in 1977, when Ron began investigating a mysterious boat-shaped object which had been aerially photographed by a Turkish Air Force reconnaissance pilot while on a routine photo survey mission. The pilot, Lieutenant A. Curtis, took these photographs from an altitude of 10,000 feet, approximately 12 miles from Mount Ararat. They were examined by a Turkish captain assigned to photo interpretation, who spotted the symmetrical boat shape in what appeared at the time to be a lava flow. As a result, a team of Turkish explorers and researchers examined the object and discovered that its dimensions were indeed near those of the Ark as stated in the Bible, most particularly those of the length. In 1960, news of the photos reached the United States and soon caught the attention of a group of scientists and explorers known as the Archaeological Research Foundation. A second expedition to the site was soon formed under the aegis of Turkish military officers in a joint Turkish-American exploratory endeavor. Included in the American team was businessman Wilbur Bishop, who provided this footage of the 1960 expedition.
The trip to Dolgabazin started, of course, in Ankara. We flew the Turkish airline to Erzurum. From there, I rented a Fiat station wagon, and we went from there to Dolgabazin. The Turkish people knew what we were talking about, of course, and we went by the van over to this camp, which is right near the entrance to Persia. And there we rode horseback over to the site.
The American team journeyed to the site accompanied by the Turkish soldiers. Upon reaching the site, Wilbur gives us the team's reactions concerning the first viewing of the object.
Well, we got off of the horses and we looked down and see it right from there. We was about, I guess, 500 feet from the site, on the side of the hill. We walked down from there. We had to jump several crevices in the earth from the earthquakes that had happened. All of us thought it was a boat. Till we left, when we didn't find any timber or anything, well, we figured it wasn't there.
Also with the American team was Dr. Arthur Brandenberger, a stereophotogrammetry expert. After studying the object and comparing the measurements to those in the aerial photos, he was quoted as saying, "I have no doubt at all that the object is a ship. In my entire career, I have never seen an object like this on a stereo photo." However, the rest of the team aren't convinced. So, due to the lack of finding evidence to match their hopes and expectations, they prepare to blow a hole in the side of the object.
Of course, we took a movie of trying to explode part of it out. I asked the Colonel Bockel if he had some dynamite. He says, "No, but we got plenty of black powder." And so I told him, "Go get it." And we got it and blew the hole in. And later I found out now that that was one of the timbers was right there, but we didn't recognize it.
The team sets the explosive and, following the blast, still finds nothing that they recognize as evidence which would convince them or others that the ship-shaped object is the fabled Ark. Again, finding nothing to bolster their waning enthusiasm, they abandon their quest and the site and return home. On September 5th, 1960, Life magazine reported briefly the results of the expedition, after which interest in the object generated by the quest wanes, and it slips into obscurity, to be forgotten and written off as one of nature's freaks, until the 1977 examinations by Ron Wyatt began. Ron is a nurse anesthetist and currently practices at Memorial Hospital of Nashville, Tennessee. He had become intrigued by the object when the Life magazine article of 1960 caught his attention. However, Ron had family and career obligations to meet, and had to satisfy his yearning for adventure by studying and reading. He spent countless hours researching and studying the various sciences, particularly geology and archaeology, in preparation for the time when he could break free and begin actual field exploration of the boat-shaped object and the surrounding area.
We, at that point in time, began to do a lot of research, background research on the probable landing site of Noah's Ark, and review the existing stories about people that claim to have seen the Ark on the mountain and nearby areas.
During his studies, Ron discovers there are over 200 accounts of a universal global flood as made record of by various cultures, assorted myths, legends, and languages. Ron feels this is more than ample evidence for the purpose of supporting a massive universal flood theory. Also, Ron's studies reveal that there have been approximately 30 sightings of the Ark reported as resting on Mount Ararat, but none of the sightings have been documented as fact. In addition to this, many of the reports are contradictory and conflict with one another.
The 30 so-called eyewitnesses, and I don't doubt the integrity of these people, there are several stone formations on that mountain that resemble a boat, but no one was ever able to get photographic proof. Also, I found that, say for example, in World War II, the pilots that flew by the mountain and made entries in their flight log that they had seen a boat-shaped formation on the mountain. They said that the boat-shaped formation was on the southeast face of the mountain. The person that wrote this, or quoted this in his book, said that the log stated it was on the northwest face of the mountain. And so I found that some of the reliable data had been misquoted in some of the books in an attempt to convince people that the boat perhaps was in a different site than it really was. And so, given all of this information and the lack of proof, we decided to look elsewhere.
The sleeping volcano has been intermittently active throughout thousands of years and is also heavily glaciated. Ron can't see how a wood structure could have possibly survived on a mountain that has constantly been scoured by lava and glaciers for over 5,000 years. During his studies, he makes note of the fact that not one well-documented source states specifically that the Ark came to rest precisely on Mount Ararat. However, the Bible does state in Genesis 8:4 that the Ark came to rest in the mountains. That's plural, mountains of Ararat. Could it be that the Ark came to rest on a smaller sister mountain of Ararat proper? Have well-intending prior expeditions searched Ararat only because it is the highest point in the area, and as a result, overlooked and neglected other possible landing sites of the Ark? Point by point, Ron begins to build a case for the possibility of the Ark not being on Mount Ararat proper. Due to these conclusions drawn from his extensive research, he is more intrigued than ever concerning the possibilities of the site, which was explored and summarily abandoned by the 1960 expedition. At long last, in 1977, after 17 years of waiting, research, and dreaming, Ron has fulfilled his obligations and is able to begin actual field work in eastern Turkey. He hires a Turkish driver and assistant named Dilavar to aid him in his work. Over the years, this man becomes a trusted friend and ally. Upon first arrival and examination, he finds the area to be wild and intimidating in its natural ruggedness and beauty. He remembers wondering how he would ever possibly discover what he was searching for in this vast, lonely region. The country is immense, its wide, expansive vistas, and Ron finds it to be rich in geologic history. The area is also blessed with the wealth of many wondrous relics from antiquity and treasures from civilizations past. One soon becomes enchanted by the natural beauty of the region and develops a sense of being lost in time. In determining precisely where to begin his investigations, Ron approaches the matter differently than his Ark hunting predecessors. Instead of focusing his search on Mount Ararat, he began with a broader scope of vision. He feels strongly that an occasion as momentous as the landfall of Noah's Ark would be made record of in history and ancient legend by local inhabitants of the region. His insight and intuition were to pay off handsomely. He began by visiting and talking to villagers in the general proximity of the boat-shaped object. After several days of becoming acquainted with them and earning their trust, he gets the needed directions to the general area he has awaited so long to visit. At long last, here is the object which has held his fascination for so many years.
And here we are at last, gazing upon the mortal remains of the great boat that Noah and his family rode to safety. When I arrived at the boat-shaped object, I was amazed at how much it looked like a boat. If you've ever seen a boat that had a hole in it and had partially sunk down to where just the railings of the boat were above the water, this is exactly what I saw sitting out there on that mountainside.
The site is located approximately 15 miles south of Mount Ararat and is known locally as Doomsday Mountain. The elevation is approximately 6,375 feet above sea level. Ron takes the dimensions of the object and finds it to be approximately 515 feet in length. His data corresponds with the original aerial photo survey and ground measurements which were made by both the Turkish and American teams. He finds it to be generally in the same condition as the 1960 expedition had described it. The object appeared as a long, boat-shaped semi-oval with a mound in the center having 20-foot-high earth-packed rims. Ron would like to take samples for chemical analysis, but at this point in time has no permits allowing him to do so. Although no conclusive evidence, other than the dimensions and obvious boat shape concerning the object possibly being the Ark, can be drawn from this first encounter, Ron is determined to return at a later time if and when he can get a permit to excavate. He feels strongly, intuitively, that there is much more here to be learned. However, Ron has made note of the fact that the strata where the object rests is sedimentary Cretaceous water-laid rock. This is an important point for purposes of documenting this area as the possible landing site of the Ark. As Ron continues his search for possible signs and traces of the legendary ship, he continues to befriend and talk to the villagers of the area. As he does so, more mysteries of the region begin to unfold. These people live today as they have for generations past. They tend their flocks of sheep and cattle and wander through their respective territories from season to season in a timeless ritual as a means for survival. They are a hardy breed of people and manage to survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet. They live in a rugged, unforgiving land that is both cruel and inhospitable. It is riddled with major earthquakes and has major unpredictable cold and hot spells during summer and winter. During winter, wolves freely roam the countryside, and there are massive avalanches. In summer, it is hot and arid, and sudden deadly windstorms arise. As illustrated here, one can see large clouds of dust from a windstorm moving and crawling like wraiths over the huge black lava beds at the base of Ararat. At every location Ron visits, Mount Ararat stands as a sentinel over the land and mysteries she has guarded for thousands of years. The Turkish word for Mount Ararat is Aridağ, which translated into English means the Mountain of Pain. This is an appropriate name, as many climbers have lost their lives on her slopes during adverse conditions. Notwithstanding the dangers normally associated with climbing any mountain, Aridağ is a high, lone mountain rising abruptly from the plains of Aras of 3,000 feet to a height of approximately 17,000 feet. Her majestic presence is a constant reminder to Ron that this area may indeed be the cradle of civilization. The thunder from lightning on Ararat is not the only thunder this captivating region has known. In ancient times, this area was a buffer kingdom between rival empires, and many times throughout the centuries has this land known the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel from fierce rival warriors' weaponry. The local villagers who have come to know and trust Ron are familiar with every stone, boulder, and canyon of their land. Once again, directions they provide him with lead him to a remarkable series of discoveries. He finds 3 massive anchor-type stones, all approximately 8 feet high and weighing several tons each. All are similar in proportion and design and have 8 distinct crosses, which are carved in the stone in a pattern which Ron and other experts believe refer to the 8 survivors of the flood. The placing and alignment on the stones tell of their relationship to Noah and one another. This is called an iconographic representation. Ron elaborates.
Like all the other grave markers in this area, the Valley of the Eight, this marker once had 8 crosses. Now these are a beautiful representation of the ornate Byzantine cross dating back to approximately the 3rd century AD. The large cross representing Noah is especially ornate. The one representing his wife is quite a beautiful design. Now we have the matched pairing here, the eldest son and his wife. These crosses are of the ornate style. We have this cross here that represents one of the sons beyond the first son, and it matches with this one. Up here we have the representation of the other son, but the representation, or the cross representing his wife, is missing and apparently got broken away over the years. The alignment of these stones tell us the direction from which the boat came as it approached and the mountain that it landed on. One of these stones is approximately a quarter of a mile from the boat itself. Now these stones, or this type anchor stone, is a very familiar object to the students of early navigation. They were used by many of the early civilizations, the Phoenicians in particular, and the shores of the Mediterranean and the floor of the Mediterranean is strewn with these stones. The difference that becomes obvious immediately is the difference in size.
These giant pierced stones are similar to ancient anchor stones used in the Mediterranean for centuries and millennia. These pierced stones are like the large Bronze Age stone anchors from the Mediterranean. Tall, broad when viewed from the side, thin when viewed edgewise or end-on, tapered towards the top, and have rope holes at their upper ends. On all of these counts, therefore, they qualify quite readily as fitting the picture of stone anchors as Ron originally identified them. Only in size or scale do these stones differ significantly from their considerably smaller Mediterranean counterparts. If the size of the stone anchors implies the size of the boat or ship on which they were used, how much more should it be true for these stone anchors weighing several tons to be, by this standard, ark-size stone anchors? As electrifying as these discoveries are for Ron, they're not the only reason for him to believe that this area is the possible landing place of the Ark. Villagers tell Ron that the village in which the standing anchor stone rests is known as the Village of Eight. Also, this majestic valley, located a few miles from the village, is known as the Valley or Region of the Eight. None of the inhabitants of this region know how these names came to be. They've been passed down from generation to generation. Again, he clearly finds reference to the 8 survivors of the flood. Here is another strong indication to Ron that someone from antiquity has left record of the landing place and survival of Noah and his family within this mystical and enchanting region. Upon Ron's return to the United States, he calls Dr. William Shea of the Biblical Research Institute of Washington, D.C., for help in sorting and analyzing his data. Dr. Shea has also been aware of the 1960 expedition and has for some time been interested in the boat-shaped object as well. He is most pleased to have the opportunity to discuss Ron's findings and to compare notes and thoughts. Dr. Shea holds a doctorate in archaeology and is also an MD. He has had over 130 professional papers published worldwide, has taught Old Testament history at Andrews University, and is an acknowledged expert in his field.
I've never measured the exact distance, but if you stand on the object, you can see Mount Ararat in the near foreground. Mount Ararat is a very beautiful and very interesting mountain, but it has certain drawbacks when you think of the flood story in the Bible. Mount Ararat is a volcanic peak over 16,000 feet high. If you think about the Ark coming to land on a volcanic mountain, that's not a very propitious spot for it to be salvaged if you're going to find any remains. In fact, some of my friends who have been working on that particular mountain have been working on the northwest face where there's the Great Ahura Gorge. Now that blew out in historical times, and it seems like to me that would be the very worst place to have a preserved remnants of the Ark. So on the other hand, the site that we've been talking about in the mountains across the valley, those are sedimentary rocks. They're not volcanic rocks, sedimentary rocks, water-laid rocks, the type of rocks that one would expect from flood activity. Another thing about Mount Ararat is that it's a glacial-covered mountain peak. I don't know the exact dimensions, and it varies according to the weather, of course. The glaciers shrink back in the summertime and they extend in the wintertime. But several thousand feet of the mountain's top are covered with glaciers, and these glaciers, of course, scour the rock of the mountainside. So if you had an ark-shaped object up there, it would suffer from the same damage that the scouring of the rock would suffer from. Now, the formation that we have, as it's been surveyed both from aerial photographs and on the ground, it's been measured both ways, is 150 meters long, or almost 500 feet. If you take that long Egyptian cubit, assuming Moses is the author of the account, or the transmitter of the account, and apply that standard of measurement, it is interesting that this formation, either in the photographs or on the ground, has measured to essentially what would be 300 cubits long. Now that's a remarkable correspondence. It's not 500 cubits, it's not 150 cubits, it just happens to be 300 cubits long. And the biblical story just happens to record the length of the ark as 300 cubits long.
On one occasion, Dr. Shea had made a trip to eastern Turkey and had the opportunity to examine some of Ron's discoveries, particularly the massive anchor stones.
I've seen 3 of those stones in the field. One is in a village and 2 are out in the fields by the village. The first point that one can make in comparing with anchor stones, and we have many, many anchor stones to compare with. Anchor stones were the common way to anchor ships until iron came in about 1200 BC. Anchor stones are tall in one dimension. They are thin in another direction, and they have a hole at the top. Now, the other aspect of these stones is their iconography. Somebody has carved some signs into them, as you can see from this one right here. The large cross in the center would be Noah. The medium-sized cross to the right and below would represent Noah's wife. 3 of the crosses up one side, above the arm of the cross, the major cross, would represent Noah's sons. The other 3 crosses up the other side would represent the wives of Noah's sons. There's exactly 8 crosses. There are 8 people in the flood story, and these are engraved upon stones that look very much like anchor type of stones. These are Christian crosses, but they indicate that the people who put those crosses on these stones saw some type of connection between these particular stones and the idea of Noah and the ark and the 8 people that were in the ark according to the biblical record. Now these stones are very unusual and irregular in that they are not near any normal natural body of water. It seems evident to me that somebody either wanted to depict something like an anchor stone or actually used an anchor stone in this area. And yet the nearest bodies of water are 75 miles to the southwest and 100 miles to the north. No normal, natural, reasonable explanation for why anchor stones would be used in this particular area.
Ron and Bill agree that much progress has been made on Ron's first foray into the field. Due to the success of the trip and the strength of the discoveries made, Ron feels more strongly than ever that he is on the verge of a major breakthrough. As he reviews his data, the boat-shaped object continues to haunt him as it has for the past 17 years. Then, unexpectedly, a most surprising and fortuitous event takes place.
My disappointment at having to wait on a permit for a later date was offset by an earthquake that happened in 1978 that did a much better job of excavating the boat than I could have done in maybe a year or 2 years hard work.
Ron is not prepared for the sight he's seeing. The earthquake has dropped the earth from around the sides of the remains, and the formation is now completely exposed. There, at 6,300 feet above sea level, in the mountains of Ararat, lies what appears to be the hull of a massive, ancient, man-made ship. The sides of the object are now clearly exposed, and the outline of the hull of a ship is now evident and clearly visible.
It simply dropped the earth away from the outside of the boat and left the rib timbers and other structures of the boat out there where you could see them. Also, there was a vertical split right down the center of the boat, which enabled me to measure the depth of the boat, plus get good, clean, fresh sample material out of there to have analyzed to tell us more about the chemical composition of the boat.
These two photos, post and pre-quake, give one an idea of the extent of nature's timely excavation job. The photo at left was taken in 1960 by the first party to examine the object. The photo at right was taken by Ron in 1979, shortly after the quake. It clearly shows the large quantities of earth which have been displaced from the sides of the object. Again, these two photos examine the object both post and pre-quake from yet another angle. In addition to this, the quake has cracked the object down the center, allowing Ron to take fresh samples of material for analysis. He also takes samples from around the object in order to compare the two for possible significant differences. Immediately upon Ron's return to the United States, he rushes the samples to Galbraith Labs of Knoxville, Tennessee for breakdown and analysis. The results are electrifying. Not only is there high carbon content, as in long decayed ancient wood, there are also traces of metal. Here are the first definite positive signs that the object is not just a natural phenomenon, but indeed may be man-made.
Soil samples have been taken from the formation on 2 different occasions, in 1979 and again in 1984. It's the 1979 samples that first gave the clue that there is a distinct difference in the amount of carbon in the formation as opposed to the field outside of the formation. I have the reports here, and if there was wood in this formation, that kind of a reading with 5% of carbon content would point to it. That's the kind of reading you would expect to get from the decayed wood.
Once we became aware that there were concentrations of metal in this boat formation, that were associated with what appeared to be structural remains. The next obvious step was to investigate the site with the use of metal detectors. We set up a expedition with permit to go out with 4 types of metal detection equipment, and with this we carefully surveyed the boat, and we laid out survey tape on top of the ground or on top of the formation to indicate the position of the metal patterns in the boat.
Included in the expedition of Ron and 4 other specialists was Dr. John Baumgardner, a physicist from Los Alamos National Laboratories of Los Alamos, New Mexico. Using 3 types of sophisticated metal detection devices, they began to lay down colored survey ribbons in correlation with the metal detection readings on both the tops and sides of the boat-shaped object. Slowly, a pattern with regular features begins to emerge. The pattern reveals the form of a symmetrical internal subsurface structure of massive proportions.
In August of 1984, this is really the next new step in the study of this formation. You could call the year from August of 84 to August of 85 the year of the metal detector, because he took a metal detector went over the formation, and first of all, he got positive readings from his metal detector. Second, as he studied it more with his metal detector, the readings not only showed some readings, but it showed readings in patterns. Now, during that year, from August of 84 to August of 85, he and several other co-workers went over that formation with 3 different types of metal detectors, as I understand it. And the results with all 3 different types of metal detectors were consistent, and they did indeed give a pattern as they laid out strips which show you some of the patterns that they got. Now, they also got crosswise patterns and in a lengthwise patterning, and this was first discovered with the metal detectors.
Since the negative and positive to these readings have been obtained using 4 different types of metal detectors, since one of these is species-specific in terms of the type of metal detected, since neither of these methods provides any positive readings for the field around the object, and since these positive readings can be correlated with visually observable features of the formation along the portion of one side of it, considerable confidence can be placed in the accuracy of these readings. Thus, the metallic distribution pattern of this formation, whatever it means, seems reasonably straightforward and clear.
Whatever is giving the positive readings on the metal detectors, presumably some type of metal, we're not sure what kind, would have to be patterned in the formation. And the question then is, why is it patterned in the formation? Well, let me just give you a hypothesis, a suggestion. If you had petrified wood in this formation, and the petrification takes place by a process of mineral elements flowing through the wood and depositing in them, then you would expect the trace readings that those minerals would give to follow the pattern of the decayed timbers and the petrified wood, petrification process. And so one possibility would be that this is a reflection of the petrification process of an original form, which would underlay this formation as it now stands.
When we did this metal detector evaluation of the boat formation, we covered the sides of the boat also, the area that had been left bare when the earth fell away during the earthquake, and the rib timber patterns and the keel or keelson patterns were very obvious there along the sides also. Now, another thing we did with these metal detectors, where we spotted high concentrations, say of iron, for example, we were able to collect a sample of 91% pure iron that showed preferential gradients under microscopic examination. And in our language, that meant that this had been hand-worked. It was a right-angled bracket that we...
Although this is an incredible breakthrough, Ron and the team realize that more data is needed before they can draw any conclusions as to whether or not this is a ship. Though exciting and promising, it remains to confirm this pattern with more details and deeply penetrating non-invasive equipment, such as the new Subsurface Interface Radar Scanner. Subsurface Interface Radar is a new high-technology tool which allows examination of objects underground without preliminary digging or excavation. The principle is simple enough. Electromagnetic pulses, or short-wave-length electric energy bursts, are transmitted into the ground. Echoes from these pulses bounce back and are measured by a receiver. The echo time can be translated into readings which are graphically recorded on a continuous roll of paper, such as an electrocardiogram printout. Thus, objects beneath the surface of the ground level may be located and, to some degree, measured. In the summer of 1986, Ron and his team have assembled once again and have received the necessary permits from the Turkish government in order to perform the radar scan. Ron and the crew are poised and ready when once again the unpredictabilities of the region rear their heads and stop Ron and his team short in their tracks.
We got back to America, raised the money, and made the arrangements to get a subsurface interface radar system out to eastern Turkey. We had the appropriate permit at this point in time. Now, we had been informed that we were in some danger of terrorists attacking us or taking us hostage. And in the light of this, the Turkish government provided a group of 30 commandos that accompanied us out to the boat formation each day. And they would go out and hide themselves in the crevices, canyons and whatnot around the boat site. Now, what happened just took a matter of seconds, but to me it seemed like several minutes. Our Turkish commandos just rose up literally from the earth where they had been hiding and decimated these terrorists with automatic gunfire.
Once again, the thunder of death and violence echo off the walls of Doomsday Mountain. The commandos take their work seriously, and these are the results. Out of necessity, the laws of these lands are harsh and strict, and these terrorists' guns are silenced forever. Ron makes the Turkish headlines, but not with the news he'd wanted. No one likes being a part of something like this.
This effectively stalled our attempts to do a radar scan on the boat, and of course it was some time after that.
Yet again, Ron has been dealt another blow. Every trip is extremely costly, and this one has been particularly so, due to having the radar technicians and support teams involved. It is crushing, after so many years of working and dreaming, to be so near the end of one's quest, only to be halted again so abruptly. As he has had to do on so many occasions, he calls on almost superhuman patience and tolerance, and once again, he waits. Ron's patience and willingness to persevere pay off. In August 1985, he receives the necessary permits and clearance to perform the radar examinations. At long last, they perform the scan, and the results are stunning. Before their very eyes, the machine tells the story of what lies beneath the surface of the object. There are massive keelsons, deck timbers, open chambers, gunnels, and other various configurations which Ron and other specialists believe identifies the object as the remains of an ancient man-made ship.
Basically, the radar scans show the same thing that the metal detector scans did, only with more detail. They show there's a pattern. They show there's a pattern of linear lines, there's a pattern of cross lines, and there's a pattern of even distribution to these lines in both directions. Now that's precisely what you would expect out of the remains of a ship-type object, because you would have a keel, you would have parallel lines which would be keelsons, and you would have the transverse lines which would be bulkheads and other reinforcing of the ship.
Immediately after the earthquake, it was to measure the depth of the deposit or the remains of the boat along the length of the boat. At the point where the deposit thickened, it was at that point that the upper decks began. And we found that this was a three-tiered or three-decked boat. Now in 1985, 1986, and 87, we were able to measure this laterally also. This data, with the data that we got from the radar scan, allows us to know what the boat looked like and to be able to reproduce a model, scale model of that boat within very close tolerances of what it actually looked like.
After consulting computer specialists and careful, detailed review of years of research and combined data, Ron constructs a scale model of what his data tells him the Ark resembled.
This is the best estimate of what Noah's Ark looked like. And we've designed this so that we can take it apart and show you what the inside looked like. Now the deck portion of the boat shows up very clearly on the radar scans, and we have reproduced that here in the deck portion of the model. We're delighted with the results, and at this point in time, personally, I can look anybody in the eye and say that this boat-shaped formation in eastern Turkey is actually the remains of Noah's Ark.
We've gone about as far as we can go in surface survey work and even scanning work. There are other types of scans that could be done. I don't know that it would be that helpful really to get more scans. What we really need now is excavation. But I would say that each one of these positive steps does point directly identifying this formation as containing remains of Noah's Ark, but the final proof of the pudding ultimately must come from excavation. In terms of the importance of the location of Noah's Ark and the identification of it, I would say make three main points. First of all, as one goes through the history of the human race in the Bible, this stands as an important historical event, a very transitional event. It's an event that divides two eras in biblical history. So just in terms of history of the race, it's an important event. Second, I would say that it will have far-reaching implications in the realms of both science and history. Obviously, some scientific theories are going to have to be revised if we really have found a boat-shaped formation from Diluvian times at the 6,300-foot level in these mountains in eastern Turkey. Third, I would say that there is a religious teaching out of it. There's a theology in Genesis 6 to 9, the 3 chapters that cover the flood story, and I would say it reveals 2 sides of the character of God. It reveals the side of character of God as judge, and it reveals the side of the character of God as redeemer. It reveals his character as judge of the antediluvians for the nature of their civilization, yet his redemptive activity is shown in his graciousness and mercy extended to Noah and his family.
Why do explorers risk their lives searching for the remains of the Ark? Many have died in the quest. For some, surely the adventure is enough. But for most, there's more. A need, perhaps a hunger, to know more about our human heritage, our basic beginnings. Who are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Do these captivating regions hold the secrets to our earliest beginnings as a race? Is this indeed the cradle of all civilization? What do these discoveries mean? Are they clues to the final answers to the questions of the birth of the human race? And if not, what is this mysterious ship-shaped object located 6,300 feet above sea level in the mountains of Ararat? Ron thinks he knows some of the answers. He believes it is Noah's Ark found.